Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about an objective view of the health concerns for people who do ketogenic diets. And this is not going to be an anti-ketogenic diet video in any way. It's going to be very neutral in regard to that. But what I want people to understand is to actually be realistic about the health concerns here, because I feel like people on both sides of the fence do not address this correctly. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And there have been different points to where I've taken both a positive and a negative stance of this diet over the years. It's something I have used myself over the years multiple times. Something hell I've used even when gaining muscle in the past. I've used it when cutting body weight. It's something I do have a lot of experience with, and I have read literally every book every expert or health professional has ever written on it, probably at one time or another. Maybe not the newest stuff, but at least anything that's 5 years old or older, I've read it. So I think the things that people don't want to discuss is number one, HDL cholesterol, how to regulate it. Number two, the fact that some people don't have an appropriate lifestyle to go with the diet. Number three, not eating enough vegetables. Number four, not paying attention to electrolyte balances. That is what the health concerns are about. So when I say that this is a diet that done incorrectly can really, really hurt you, those are the things I'm talking about. So right off the bat, let me just hit those last two first. Vegetables. People who follow this diet who don't eat any vegetables, and I'm not telling you to eat a giant salad. In fact, I don't even believe humans are necessarily meant to eat raw food in general. I think we do better with cooked food. But people who aren't eating vegetables on it, that's a problem. Like if you're literally eating bacon and cheese all day long and that's all you're eating and you're not eating vegetables, you're not working broccoli, spinach, things like that in green vegetables to get your 20 grams or 30 grams of carbs or whatever it is that you're trying to get in, then it's a problem. And I would say that for people who are trying to run this sort of diet and they can only get away with 20 grams of carbs while staying in ketosis, not filling all 20 of those grams with green vegetables is a major mistake. It causes potential health risk. You're creating dietary imbalances, and that is actually your biggest solution for making a diet like this more balanced. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. When you're in a caloric deficit, where you get your fuel actually really doesn't matter as long as protein and stuff are sufficient. It doesn't matter whether you're filling your calories with carbs or fats. In terms of the way your body is going to function overall once you're used to whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter that much. And that's the other point. People who are both for and against it don't seem to acknowledge that point. People who love this sort of diet don't acknowledge that. That yeah, the carbs will work just as well as fats. The ketogenic diets work purely upon a diet adherence principle. They allow you tight control of your caloric intake. That is the benefit of them. And they work very well for that. And for people with certain health conditions, they do seem to help. And there is actual evidence of that. So that's what they need to acknowledge. And then people on the other end need to acknowledge the same thing, that when you're in a caloric deficit, fats versus carbs don't really matter. People who run a really, really, really high-fat diet, 70-80% of their calories from fat, can lose body fat just fine on the same caloric deficit. That's reality. All right? But the vegetables is really a problem. That is really a big problem. People not consuming vegetables on this sort of diet, it puts you at a much, much higher risk of problems. Number two is going to be the electrolyte in, and that's the one that scares me. That's when I say that this is a diet that can hurt you in the short term, why you need to be under the care of a medical professional or registered dietitian if you don't know enough about it to do it, that it's dangerous. This particular diet can cause very quick dehydration. And it's because you tend to excrete sodium and potassium and things like that at a higher than normal rate. And if you aren't paying attention to your electrolyte intake, and you don't know what you're looking for, and you're not consuming enough sodium, enough potassium, enough magnesium, it's a problem. And this is one of the few diets out there where I would recommend supplementing minerals. I would say for most of you out there on really high carb diets, people say, well, magnesium is critical for performance and muscle growth. Yes, it is. That's true. Magnesium is critical for muscle growth and strength and athletic performance. And having large intakes of it is critical. But if you're eating brown rice and potatoes every day, odds are you're consuming more than sufficient amounts of it. On a keto diet, unless you're eating the dark chocolate every day and getting 20 grams of your carbs from dark chocolate, magnesium can be a problem. It might be one of the diets you would want to supplement a little magnesium citrate on, right? There's that to factor in. There is also the fact that, again, it's a diet that you want to add salt. And now people say, oh my gosh, saturated fat and salt, that's on blood pressure. No, it's actually not. It really isn't. Meaning you're going to need more salt to resolve your issues. And consistent salt intake is not generally associated in high blood pressure in active, physically active people. It really isn't until you start throwing a bunch of anabolic steroids back in the mix. Just going to get to my other point. It's going to be drugs. People who run Trend, for example, and do a ketogenic diet, you're a moron. You're a moron who has a death wish. And we'll get over to that with the LDL cholesterol point. But not paying attention to your electrolyte intake, not making sure you're getting enough sodium, potassium, and magnesium, and definitely going over the daily recommended amounts of those on this, because that daily recommended amount assumes a balanced diet. A keto diet is not a balanced diet. It isn't. And you need to address that fact that you have different aldosterone levels on this diet. And in fact, if you drop a ton of water weight on it, I'm going to say that right now, like if you lose 10 pounds in your first week or two on a keto diet, I can tell you right now, your sodium and magnesium intake is not sufficient. Because you wouldn't have lost that water weight if your electrolyte intake was balanced correctly. You actually wouldn't have lost that. So salting your food becomes important. And it is a big deal because the failure to do so can cause problems like brain swelling. It can cause irregular heartbeat. It can cause problems. And so someone who's really unfamiliar with what they're doing and doesn't know a lot about nutrition who undertakes a diet like this, doing it outside of the care of a medical professional is a real bad idea. It's why registered dietitians tell you don't do this diet outside of supervision. Because most people don't have the knowledge to do that correctly, and they're not going to salt their foods correctly. They're not going to be looking at, hey, look at their actual daily intake of food and say, hey, am I getting enough magnesium and potassium, or am I going to have to add it somewhere, right? That's what they're not looking at. Other big one we want to talk about is going to be the LDL cholesterol. And you're going to get, right now, you're going to get people, and you're going to act like I'm not well read on this and I haven't seen all the research and data. They're going to say dietary cholesterol isn't linked to blood serum cholesterol. You're right, it isn't. And I did not use the word dietary cholesterol at all. It's going to be about saturated fat. It's going to be about your fat intake, which is not cholesterol. Those are two separate things, right? So again, people are already displaying their ignorance when they bring that point up. I never said dietary cholesterol. I talked about your LDL cholesterol, where your fat intake impacts that. And if you're one of those people who your LDL goes up on this diet, this may not be the right diet for you. Just like I would say, if you're one of the people who get continual diarrhea and you can't balance the diarrhea out even when you can take more salt in, go back to the electrolyte point, you can't run this diet safely if that's you. If you get diarrhea more than your first few days on it, you try everything like adding salt, everything else to it, adding vegetables, the diarrhea doesn't go away. You can't run a ketogenic diet. It will hurt you. It's not for you. Back to the other point with LDL cholesterol. A lot of that comes down to people having bad lifestyles, meaning you run this diet and you don't train hard, you're going to be at higher risk of elevated LDL cholesterol. This is not a diet for sedentary people. Being sedentary will kill you. Eating a huge amount of saturated fat while being sedentary will kill you, even if in the short term you're okay and you lose body fat and it helps. It'll help you live a little longer, but at that point, your negatives in your life are offsetting the benefits from the weight loss. It's still going to kill you, right? So if you're sedentary and you don't train and your LDL starts going up as a result of this diet, you're in a bad situation. Now, some people say, well, there's two different types of LDL. Yeah, and most of you are not going to spend the $500 for the blood test to find out which type of elevated LDL you have. But usually what happens, the people who do have LDL problems on this diet, when is it that it occurs? When they're back in a caloric surplus. And we come back to the point of people not counting calories. They think that this sort of diet has a magical ability to bypass calories in, calories out. It doesn't. And the moment you go back to caloric maintenance, what happens? A lot of you people out there who are really subject to elevated cholesterol levels start seeing elevated LDL cholesterols. All right, that's now a health risk, particularly if you're more sedentary. I would say for a lot of people, what's the way to avoid that? Be really active. People who lift weights and do conditioning work usually don't see the elevated LDL cholesterol unless they're injecting a bunch of drugs. People start using Tren That's the perfect example of people whose blood work looks even more horrific on this diet. But taking people out of the equation who are not using anabolics, and that's my other point. I got mad when Lobliner promoted this diet because Lobliner uses Tren and other anabolics. That's a problem. That's a health risk. He shouldn't be doing a diet like this. It's going to kill him. And he shouldn't be promoting it knowing that he promotes drug use. So that's part of people's problem. They're not active enough to follow a diet like this and still have good blood work, and they're not tracking calories. What is it people do? And I know I have family members who are on keto diets who are still fat. And it's because you look up and every single day they're putting up recipes of, oh, I found a way to make keto brownies. I found a way to make keto cheesecake. You know what? You can have those things in moderation. You can't have them every day. If you want to have a keto cheesecake once a week and you're going to follow a keto diet, that's probably okay if your energy turnover is high enough to facilitate it. But hyperpalatable foods is what made you fat in the first place. Sitting on your lazy fat ass, stuffing your face with cheesecake is what made most of you fat to begin with. That's why you're a fat piece of shit and you're unhealthy, right? So you're going to go back to doing it. And I have family members who do this. They post keto brownies, keto cheesecake, keto muffins. And I don't see them posting pictures of their barbell squats or their sled drags. And then they wonder why they're still 40 pounds overweight. Well, that's exactly why. You're sitting on your lazy ass stuffing your fat face with brownies and cheesecake. No shit, you're still fat 3 years into keto. But we come back to the point of saying, okay, wait a minute, shouldn't I be eating whole foods for most of this? Yeah, that's what you should be doing. Now, you can slip in those treats on occasion. They'll be perfectly fine if you've earned them, if you've expended the energy to justify it. Look, if you're squatting 3 days a week and you're doing cardio on your off days, or conditioning work, some barbell complexes or sled drags or farmer's walks or kettlebell swings the other 3 days, you might have the calories to spare to get away with that. But as soon as you start saying, well, I'm going to work more of these treat foods in and I'm not training hard, you start reaching caloric maintenance or a surplus again. Now you start reaching caloric surplus on a diet that is really, really, really high in fat. I don't care whether it's a keto diet or not. You go back to a caloric surplus, you're not athletic, you're not extremely physically active, and you're now in a caloric surplus on a diet that's very high in fat. What do you think is going to happen? Your LDL is going to go up. Your blood work's going to look bad. It's going to hurt you. It's unhealthy. You have to find balance in this. And notice I didn't say anything wrong about eating bacon or cheese or any of that at that point. I didn't even say that. You know what? If your caloric intake allows for it and you're physically active and you're eating your vegetables and your electrolytes are balanced, it's probably fine. In fact, those salty foods are actually usually really good in ketosis for helping you not lose all that extra water weight, keeping your athletic performance up. They can be perfectly fine. But you better have everything balanced. You better be eating your broccoli and spinach. You better be doing your lifting and your conditioning work. You better be watching your calories and not saying, hey, I can just eat limitless amounts of food and let me work in these keto brownies every single day while not doing barbell squats. All right, that's exactly the point where this becomes a fat gain diet, or you're still 30 pounds overweight with 30 pounds of extra fat 2 years into running it, and you're still unhealthy. That's exactly what causes it. Hyperpalatable foods with a high caloric density. That's exactly what you're falling back to while being sedentary. That sort of tendency is what will make people unhealthy on this diet. I'll probably do a different video discussing the athletic performance and muscle retention problems that you can run into and how to avoid those on this type of diet. But I wanted to address these health points because people need to be realistic about them if they say that this is the sort of diet they're going to follow, because it works very well. I mean, this sort of diet is fantastic for maintaining a rigid caloric intake. It actually works really, really well. That's one reason so many people lose body fat on it so effectively. But done incorrectly and done by people who don't know what they're doing, it's actually potentially dangerous and it can hurt you. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.